Good afternoon and welcome. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Elisa Sai. I'm the Data and AI Strategy Lead for Capgemini Invent, and I'm thrilled to be here today to discuss such a hot topic. One that's really potentially not just changing the way we work, but the way we think about work. Agentic AI, everyone is talking about, and it's really potentially giving that opportunity to move from automation to autonomy, where agents are not really just a tool for us to use and provide help in our work, but really they can observe, act, making decisions. Think about potential teammates, colleagues that are really embedded into the organization, the operating model, the workflow, our processes. And this is not just a technology channel. It's very much a challenge around the way we work and the human elements and the organizational elements. So our culture, our behavior, our way to deliver work, and ethics and risk. So lots to talk about today, and I'm really delighted to be joined by a great panelist. So great leaders working in the public sector space that have great experience in innovation, delivery, and really embedding AI. So today, here, we've got Emily from our Deputy Director for DICIT. We've got Sean Thomas, CDO at Department of Business and Trade. We've got Amy Smith from the Met, the Director of Data. And we've got Morgan Rees, who's leading our data and AI consulting capabilities for Capgemini Invent. So thank you for being here today. So we're going to go straight into the conversation. We're not going to take questions. So if you've got any question at the end, please come and find us. We'll be very happy to answer any question. So to get us started, before we go really into the conversation around a deep dive about the organizational elements and what does it mean, I would like really to get your point of view. Where do you think that Agentic AI can deliver value for organization and in government specifically, in the sort of real near term? Amy, do you want to start?
I can start, yeah, but I'll tell you for free, the Metropolitan Police Service is not currently using Agentic AI, so some people will be really pleased about that. Where do we see the value of Agentic AI will be in reducing incredibly bureaucratic processes that are absolutely fundamental to justice. So for those who don't understand how policing really works, because you spend your whole time watching cop shows on telly, which is nothing like what is actually happening, police officers spend a lot of their time, even with modern technology that is taking video and voice and is able to put data in on the move, processing that information very specifically into a number of forms that are required by the criminal justice system to make sure that objective evidence is collected, reviewed, and then taken forward or not, depending on whether it indicates a crime has happened or whether it indicates who the suspect is or it indicates what kind of outcome we can achieve. That is a very bureaucratic process. And for me, starting to think about where both robotic process automation, but then also where Agentic AI can start to identify where things could be filled in, accessed, changed, and sped up on behalf of an officer who might be on the ground would be an absolute game changer and keep more cops on the street and certainly keep more officers investigating crimes and not completing endless admin and looking for solutions. So that is where we're heading. We're not there yet.
Thank you. Really, Sean?
Yeah, I'm happy to step in. Hello, everyone. So at the Government Digital Service, my mission, along with many colleagues, is to join up and personalise public services, largely digital services, but there's some offline work as well. And in terms of near-term value, we are really hopeful in Agentic AI around like contributing to that personalization of services and what we call like the handoffs between services, the data handoff between services. So if you're calling one government department and end up being put through to another, how can we use it to help put the human, either the business user or the citizen, at the centre of that, and carry them through the whole process and hide from them all the kind of institutional structures that we know go behind that. So yeah, very much around linking up data and the personalisation of service provision.
Yeah, so that follows nicely then onto the Department for Business and Trade, where we have many services to support businesses to grow in the UK and investors to invest in the UK. A lot of those services require a lot of skill to be able to make them, and one of the areas that we're investigating is how we can use some of the new technologies, including Agentic AI, to help our coders and our developers and our software and data engineers to do better work more quickly, or to do higher volumes of routine work, or also actually to check the work that humans are doing, or vice versa. So how can we use Agentic to start to make processes in the department that are quite repetitive, that cost a lot of money for the taxpayer, more efficient and effective?
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting hearing about those very different examples, because for me there is a real spectrum of opportunity when it comes to Agentic AI. At one end of a spectrum, it could be a tool to effectively automate what people do today. So we're talking productivity gains, maybe doing things a bit more efficiently, maybe quicker. But at the other end of the spectrum, I think this could be something that could help us reimagine the role of government in society and how government interacts with its citizens. But I think if we're talking near-term benefits, it's going to be on the productivity end of the spectrum. That's okay. That's a safe place to start. So think about wherever you have a frontline worker interacting with a citizen, there is a whole load of admin that sits behind that, whether that's a job centre official working with a benefit claimant, whether it's the police force example, whether it's a planning reviewer reviewing a planning application. And by using AI in the administrative process, in a strange way, we're potentially going to make our services more human by allowing those people to focus on the human interactions. And that's where I think the really exciting opportunity is.
And that's very interesting, because if we go into the culture and the team sort of like theme that we want to talk about today, I think one thing that is really striking about Agentic AI, that you can be in a position when you build also you're almost building your colleagues, right? You're building that operating model, and that means really creating that climate of trust and psychological sort of safety of experimenting using AI. So what does it really mean for the teams in terms of collaborating with these agents, so using the agent but also having agents as potential like colleagues and teammates?
It makes you really think. So we're using a tool that IAI created, actually, Consult, which we're using to consult on changes to the tariff and other business decisions that the department are taking. Where you have the human in the loop is really challenging. How you make sure there's human oversight, and at the moment the legislation is written not for Agentic AI, it's written for humans doing those tasks. So what's the route to making sure that there is enough human input at the right places to have an impact, so that we are not handing over government policy to agents in this case? And is that right? Because it makes you think about things that we've always done in government, think about them in a really different way, start thinking about ethics and decision making from a really different perspective. And that's really interesting. So in a way, some of the technologists that haven't really done it before become policymakers for government. It gives you a whole new set of opportunities.
And I think there's a reasonable, in my view, contradiction at the moment. And sitting in the government digital service, we have the privilege, I guess, of looking across departments and agencies right out across the whole of the public sector to local gov as well. And the contradiction is between sort of what the salience is and the kind of feelings we get back through things like staff surveys and of public sector workers, and a sort of a fear or an unease about where we're going with AI, which is reasonable. But all the feedback we get about the tools that have been rolled out or piloted is always like fantastic, and a really high demand to roll them out further, faster, quicker. Including consult, and I think that's interesting when like there's like a fear and an uncertainty, but equally a strong appetite when you get to use some of these tools, because they really do help with kind of consistency and productivity, and allow those colleagues of mine, public sector workers, to focus on the bits where they can really add value, and have interactions with people and users more, and allow the AI to take away some of the strain and introduce more consistency as well.
It's almost like the humans becomes even more important. Those
Yes.
human skills becomes more important for the team.
Can I leap off that point? So I don't know how many people in the room. I mean, you can't see us because we're literally in the bunker down here. But could you just put your hand up if you lead a data team? So you've got, okay, right. So I think there's two. I'm not going to answer a question around agentic for a minute. I'm going to just talk about what does it mean to teams and collaboration, and what you as leaders need to be thinking about in the room. So there's a double-edged sword here. So what does it mean for data teams? The risk of this is people see it as something that can save money in the data team, when actually agentic can really enhance the data teams that you've got, right? So it's how you land that message that this is not about saving money in this team, it's about being more productive or effective rather than just about efficiencies. So you need to be getting on that narrative quite quickly. The second bit for me is more about collaboration, and your point about transforming how organizations work. This type of capability is going to put data and insight into the hands of people who have been quite far reached from the use of data and technology, or at least the understanding of it. So what does business change look like? And how do your data teams need to connect with the people using these tools and the insight it's going to give them in a way that they haven't, I'll be honest, they could have avoided before, because they don't really want to talk to people, they just want to play with the data people. The skills of being curious, empathetic, understanding the business, how to talk in business language to business people, and I mean the business of public sector, is going to become a really critical skill for your teams. And it's on you as leaders in this space to make sure that happens. Otherwise, people will see this as something that incorrectly, in my view, replaces that team, and it isn't. It's an enhancement, but you need to be on that early with your messaging.
I totally agree, and I think it's worth reflecting a little bit on what we mean by an agentic team. So traditionally, for the last few years, we've been using AI tools to support you execute tasks in a more efficient way. With agentic AI, you can effectively execute parts of your role. So that means we can not just automate some of the boring things, but we can potentially automate the hard things. To bring this to life around an example, a few years ago, we did some work for a government tax authority that had a problem with undeclared swimming pools that should have been taxable. Now, you can probably guess this wasn't the UK. We might have many challenges in the UK. Undeclared swimming pools, I don't think, is one of them. But we used AI on geospatial images to spot these swimming pools and identified about 100 million euros of potential tax to reclaim. Great. Using AI, generate insights, we can act on it. If we were to do that today, with an agentic approach, we might use the AI to identify the swimming pools and have an agent autonomously trigger legal proceedings. So you've moved from insights to action, all executed entirely autonomously. Then you might think, well, let's build an agent to gather the evidence and inject that into the process. So you have two agents working together, and then you add a third and a fourth. All of a sudden, these agents need orchestration. So you create another agent to orchestrate how the agents are working. And at some point, these tools, they become a team. And at some point, that team is going to have to interact with other teams made up of real people and humans. And that's the culture change, and that's the interaction that we're going to have to go on to get the real benefits out of the long term and work out what that means.
And that's very interesting, but I can probably spot like a bit of controversy here.
Oh yeah,
right?
I balked at that idea. Sorry, that was me. Was I leaking?
Go for it, because I think this is where we can talk about risk and what does it mean, and where is the accountability sit.
So it makes me nervous that you might use an agent to get to an investigation. You could broadly argue. I can see the heavy lifting that Agentic AI could do in a law enforcement space, because the reality of being a detective now, it's not the sexy job it was when the Sweeney was on telly when most of you weren't born, but it's hard work. Proving a case, getting evidence, it's voluminous, right? Most, just your average sex offender's got about 5 phones, 17 devices. It's hard work to bring an investigation to bear. I totally see the benefit of that. Is the UK public comfortable with its criminal justice service being run like that? I think is a conversation you should have before you try it. And that's so. I know you're here to provoke, but it really makes me balk. These are conversations we should be having with citizens before we decide to try them in a way that, I'll be honest, a corporate organisation can just have a go.
And I think in hindsight, using an example about legal proceedings and evidence sitting next to the chief data officer from the Met Police was perhaps the wrong one to go with.
You just want them to put the data in right to start with, to be honest with you. I'm still in that phase, mate. But
Sean, what's your view in terms of the risk and the accountability in a sense? Because where does the accountability sit? I mean, this is a good example to bring up that conversation. And we can't hide behind the fact that people might be worried about it, or who's actually making those decisions.
And that's why we're taking the approach we are on some of the government tools. They're not agentic, but we're still taking that systematic decision making about where the human should be in or around the decision making process. I think the other point, though, about teams is that teams also need to be much more skilled in quantification of the value, because we're not always great at quantifying the value of data teams. When you start adding Agentic AI into those teams, if you don't have a methodology to quantify the benefit anyway, how do you start to compare the value and the cost of those agentic additions to the teams that you're already running? So some of you have heard me speak before will have heard me say evaluation is actually fundamental to the work that we're doing. We have to make sure we're doing a good job of spending public money, and if we don't evaluate the work we're doing now, we will have missed the boat to being able to quantify its value, which will mean that we might be making really bad investments and we won't be able to change them in the way that we previously could. So I think, one of the team things is making sure that in the teams we're creating, we have the capability to be able to assess the ethics, the governance, but also the value that the changes we're making have.
I think from my perspective, we're seeing very variable levels of maturity across the public sector on having those capabilities. So writing the business cases for investment, understanding the return on investment is generally very slow, stroke a big gap. Hence, we're seeing very slow adoption. So it's that is another risk, that we actually are going really slowly at understanding the potential kind of benefits, being able to monitor and evaluate them, because we just generally don't have those capabilities. All the programs of work set up. It is variable between departments, but. And so what we're hearing and what we get asked to help with in the digital centre is, can you help us with this business case? Because it's being declined in terms of investment. So that's another risk around adoption, that we're not too sure on the return on investment, and quite rightly, therefore, we shouldn't spend public money on things. But that leads to quite a slow adoption rate.
And it's interesting because almost like adoption is lower than the technology. So if we think of where we were 2 or 3 years ago, Gen AI, and then now we're talking about agentic, but the adoption is not there yet. So there is probably something as a leader thinking about what does it mean for my team, even in terms of roles, like new roles, like AI workflows architect. I mean, who heard about this, a year ago? But
is the adoption not there though? I don't know. I think I'm challenging that. I've been in the industry for a very long time, much longer than many of you. It's the fastest I've seen change occur, much faster than anything else I can remember. So while it might feel slow compared to the private sector, in a government context, it's actually really, really fast. And we're talking about not agentic, but rolling out traditional AI, and it's only been something we've been talking about from an LLM perspective for 3 years? I mean, how did we get to that language so quickly? And we've got more than half of my department using it every month. That's quite significant. If I tried to get people to make a change to how they work, it would take me a lot of effort from a change management perspective ordinarily to get half of the organisation to make that change. So I think we're actually on quite a speedy journey in the context of technology change.
So your point, there is different realities, right?
Yes, and it depends. Sometimes it depends on the tool as well. We're seeing a lot of like products or tools stuck at proof of concept stage. So they are being used, but not widely, depending on the context. Like they might be being used in one NHS trust, but we're struggling to roll them out to more, one courtroom or one education trust, and proving worth and value, and the monitoring evaluation. So there is wide usage, and I do agree from a product rollout perspective that is relatively quick, but it's I guess the scaling of that is what I think is like quite slow.
I think one reason to be optimistic is I do see the UK government leading the way globally, and I think you're setting the pace for a lot of the change we're seeing globally. I think on that point around adoption, that will be one of the biggest barriers, and I think I've already provoked the panel. What I say next might provoke everybody else in this room. And I say what I'm about to say as a data person who leads a large team of data people, and my job is to keep those data people busy. Many of them are in the room looking at me a little bit nervously about what I'm about to say. But as a data community, we have a lifetime of training to prioritize precision, repeatability, science, maths, and that's a really important foundation for understanding how these models work. But AI tools, and this is true for agentic AI, it's not precise. Right? It has human bias embedded within it. It changes, it learns, and it evolves. And if we treat AI tools as we might treat a business rule that spits out the same response every time, we're not going to be able to effectively adopt it into our processes. We've got to embrace creativity, ambiguity, and understand that these processes can be fallible, and design the governance around that, and importantly, create strict role boundaries around how we're using AI agents to put that control in place, because we can't treat them as a decision-based rules engine.
I think you've got to dance now.
Yeah.
I think that's what's
I think that's my cue to stop promoting.
and that's interesting because you talk about embracing ambiguity and thinking about what might come next, which is for me are very much kind of skills of a leader. So if we talk about leadership, how does the leadership needs to change? Or as a leader, what do you think you should continue doing or do it differently to actually, be prepared yourself and your team for what's going to happen with agentic?
I think there's a lot. So there's a programs across leadership in the civil service to try to just upskill to a baseline understanding about emerging tech and AI and the different fields of AI as well. So that's certainly a good place to start. Obviously here it's a pretty technical audience, but that often isn't the case amongst the decision makers across Whitehall. So I think that's really important, bringing up the baseline of understanding around tech, and particularly AI. And then as you were starting to touch on, thinking for leaders to think about what are the capabilities of the future we're gonna need, and how do you plan for that, and either reshape the teams you've got and grow that talent. It's going to be a challenge as well. All the and how might you do that with AI as well? Yeah.
So I think all the skills and behaviours that largely data leaders have been avoiding, despite knowing they're the right things to do, are going to come to the fore. So I am constantly hearing we need great data storytellers, right? Don't talk data, tell the story, make it relevant to the business. And I honestly think if you don't develop that skill set, or we don't recruit that kind of skill set to be engaging in our teams, but especially in our leaders, then I think that as a profession we'll be really, really behind, and something else will step into the space. So I think in leadership terms, being resilient, being able to be adaptable, being creative, all the things you said to be able to put boundaries around the agentic AI is important. If you can't tell a story that connects what you're doing to a real world problem or opportunity, then as a data leader, that's the thing you should focus on, because data is going to be in the hands of lots of people through some of these tools and these capabilities, and they're not going to need you to interpret them. They're going to need you to explain ethics, creativity, what the next stage is, vision, what it really means for, in your case, the citizen, or whatever, or for us, a victim of crime. So I think that's the skill set that I'd really hone if I was a leader or wannabe leader in this room.
And I think it's interesting to think about the communication that you need and the storytelling you need to do, because it isn't the traditional approach that you always can reuse in this instance, because you have senior leaders who are massive advocates and don't understand the ethics and the risk. Equally, you have really junior people who get fixated on ethics and risk. So you get a real mixture, and your storytelling needs to tell a story that is equally as relevant for the most senior and the most junior person, whether you're trying to communicate about the risk and the ethics or the opportunity. And that is a really, really big challenge.
So one question that something that's very close to my heart is diversity, and there's a lot of collaboration with women in data from this panel. What do we think about diversity in agentic AI? Is that going to help, or is going to actually...
Well, the underlying data is a massive challenge, right? The underlying data is not, it's got so much bias in it. Particularly when we're talking about LLMs, the way that they're made from content on the internet, we already know that the bias in there is massive. So I know in my department, whenever we're using AI, we make sure that everything is tested to check for that bias before it is used. That's not sustainable in the long term, but the bias is already there. I don't think we should be talking about whether there's bias, but how we manage that in the course of using it so that we actually minimize its impact and maybe learn something that we can apply in other contexts.
And what about diversity of teams? So having, we talk about gender diversity in terms of having that. With that, how is going to agentic potentially...
Well, I mean, I feel like it's no different in that sense to all the other products that we produce, and more we're seeing more diversity in those teams across all the disciplines that it takes to produce good digital services and products. Research, design, technology. So I guess I hope the trend continues, and I'm also interested in how it can help us, how agentic AI can help us close the gap with those who are digitally excluded as well, because always thinking about the citizens, 19% of adults either can't or won't or are challenged to get online, but maybe it can also help close that divide as well, and that exclusion that we have.
I don't know how long we've got. I'm looking because I love a rule, which is why I am where I am. For me, inclusivity is making sure you've got enough people with different perspectives helping you design the use of any tool, knowing that just admitting there's bias in the data. Imagine the bias in policing data. Come on. We all know where that's going to point, and you need people on the teams who are going to challenge you about what you do and how you use that data and insight. But knowing that every day, that's the only information we've got to go off with a human trawling through it manually. So don't be fooled into thinking we're making really, really unbiased decisions every day, because we're not. We're just doing it and it's really hard. So there's some opportunity that this kind of capability forces you to have conversations as an organisation or a department about bias and ethics that you might have avoided having had you not now got to consider it. And that, for me, is the positive about the pace of change. But if we haven't got inclusivity right in our teams and the way we work and talk to each other and say, what do you think about this from your perspective, then that way of working needs to really sort of dial up.
I agree again, and I think your second question almost answers your first question. Sian's absolutely right. These AI models, they have bias in them. We shouldn't try and hide that. And by building diverse teams, we're going to be better equipped to challenge that, make sure that training data is representative, make sure we've got the right humans in the process to challenge the decisions, particularly in critical areas of which there are lots in government, and make sure that we can test outputs, and we do test outputs. That's the only way we're going to be able to manage this.
Thank you. Very, very final question. By the end of 2026, Agentic AI is going to be a revolution or a reality check?
End of 2026, there'll be agents everywhere, but no organisation will be agentic yet.
Ditto.
I just hope we can know where they are.
Slow burn.
All right. Okay, well, thank you very much. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for listening.